183 views isn't bad for the map design. All right,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome. We're about to get started here. As people can be filing in.
Yeah.
Of course, welcome to join us and ask any questions during this stream.
And we see how many people are watching at any given time. Should wait until we have one, right? Oh, look at this. This is a cool stream. Nice.
Yeah, we can wait a little bit before. I mean, I think also it's nice to have this recorded for people. So.
Marcel, no tie for you, but that's all right. All right. So what we're getting into, we're going to get into the we're going to do a 30 to 45-minute overview of all the of the second edition between the Kickstarter and the game itself, what the changes are that we made. We can cover that in 30 to 45 minutes, right? Not a chance. I'm looking at this list of what we changed. There's too much, but we'll do our best. I'm going to get into just what I think are the biggest shifts and the whole purpose of doing the second edition. The second edition is very exciting because it's kind of a dream come true as us for a publisher because we've never had quite the momentum to take a first edition product and then relaunch it as a second edition. And we've always wanted to do it because you're never going to get it, at least we aren't, we're never going to get it perfect the first time out. There's just so much going on. You're wrangling this game from non-existence into existence, and despite no matter how much play testing and rules development and discussion you do, you're never going to get it quite right. At least we've never gotten it perfect before. And so we've always wanted to have the opportunity to take that foundation of a good game and then really dive into it and tweak it and bring it to the next level and leave it for all perpetuity in its best state. And that's what's so awesome about this campaign is because we finally had the opportunity to do it. And frankly, I didn't know how many people were going to come back, and it turns out like a lot of people, a lot of our veteran backers came back and want to be a part of this improvement process. And Brian, who spearheaded a lot of these improvements with a lot of other people's inputs and discussions, but I mean, Brian's really the one who took it and then wrangled it into the specifics, tested that specific, tweaked it, went back, got more feedback, and then like until he got it to exactly where he and the community and the team wanted it. The anyways, it's all turned out really, really well, and it's very gratifying to see that people are coming back and are going to be able to have the game in what we think is the best state, especially after their awesome support and the really large investments for the first edition. So anyway, this is kind of a little publisher dream come true for us. We haven't ever been able to do it before, and it's just very gratifying to get the game exactly where we want it, where there's no errata, no like, ooh, it would have been better maybe if we did this. Anyway, we've got almost all those holes covered. How much errata do you think we're going to have after launch?
I would say very minimal. I mean, I think we've had a lot of great feedback. Catching typos, a lot of community members that have done the print and play have helped out with that. Typos that I thought I fixed like 3 times um, they're still getting caught by the playtesters in the community, which is fantastic. So just between TTS and the print and play, people are able to access this stuff, and like that Jaeger recon squad and sniper, I think I fixed that one 3 times. But that one is good now in our copy. Not everything's getting updated. Obviously, we're probably done updating the print and play for now. We're really just, want to focus our efforts on getting the campaign finished and getting things ready for production. Since the design's, pretty much locked down at this point, we have a couple little things that we want to test in play testing. Any new maps that we get through the campaign or anything that we, these stretch goals, anything that's not quite fully tested, we want to test out. If we get that far, we have some ideas, but we'll see how far we get. Really comes down to Chris, but Chris
it really allows us to go ahead.
Chris had a cool one yesterday, and I had a really interesting one, and we'll see if they come to fruition. But I'm pretty excited about it.
This is going to be also pretty cool to begin manufacturing as soon as at least the pre-production for manufacturing. The moment the Kickstarter campaign is. Last campaign, we just kept going. We had we had to do so much more testing. We get so much component shifting and adjusting, and the shift between 1/120 scale to 1/100 scale. Anyway, it's all basically ready except for that last 2%. You would like a little more continued testing and some of the stretch reward unlocks, of course, could use a little more integration. But we're gonna be able to basically roll right into it because it's such a finished product. I think you're right. I would normally say that's a ballsy, bold statement to say that there's very little errata after publishing or after launch. However, I think this time, knock on wood, I think we got it. I think there's going to be very, very little. You just had so many more people, so many more eyes on it, so much more community churning through it, every possibility in the game and every situation that might come up. Were you about to say something, Marcel?
Yeah, well, I remember the first edition. We had a problem with the Weermacht spelling on every card and every page.
Spelling, yeah.
The team was constantly missing the point. So I think with some new additions to the team, we will definitely make it without erratas on the typos. I think
Yeah,
just
typos or
number on the
gameplay
box
error.
will be triple checked by everyone. So
That's right.
he's just
Component counts on the boxes. Yeah,
uh,
I think we've got it
but
this time. And after a year and a half of working for the company, I think most team members, most of them have been here for about a year, year and a half. This time around, I think they all know how to spell Wehrmacht. Took a while, but I think they've
definitely will.
all got it. We have a sign up. Um, so let's cover what we think. I think we may be able to go around and cover what we think the biggest shifts are and the biggest changes are, and why you might want to come back for the second edition or jump in on the second edition. Um, there's quite a bit. It's really comprehensive. I don't think Brian left any stone unturned. You were not. There was nothing sacrosanct. You literally considered everything, right? You were willing to deconstruct every element of the games, right?
I threw the kitchen sink at you with options, and I really pushed for a lot of things because I said, look, if we're doing a second edition, I think you probably agreed with me too, in that this is probably it, you know. So we really wanted to give it our all, and just a lot of feedback. Even if I'm like, oh, that's not that important, even just from like one or two individuals, I really stewed on it. I'm like, oh yeah, that could be nice. I could see that. And starting with things like this trois pas, like there was just the red lines. I mean, we could start with that. I mean, just the errata on the website, where what bridges can you cross, where can you go? And ignore the this is extra bright right now for TTS, so we're still tuning the stuff down for final production for these new maps. But you can start to see like, hey, look, where can you go? It's blatantly obvious now with the legacy maps. So we've got a lot of questions on this, so we probably should talk a little bit about this. Just the map changes in general. So
Yeah, that's one of the key topics actually that I have here. There's a lot of topics, but one of the big aspects that people may not realize how big it is and how much it impacts the game and how much work and development and time went into developing and revising these maps, as well as adding 22 new additional maps. I mean, it's sort of subtle. People probably, because it's not Chrome, it's not a bunch of new models or miniatures, but that is one of probably the biggest improvements and expansions and content improvements of second edition is this massive overhaul and expansion of the map library. And it's huge because he went into each one and really like fixed every little issue, improved them, the pathing, the strategy, the balance. When it's asymmetrical, he leaned into the asymmetry. When it wasn't, he got it. Everything's very, very balanced. Like there's now, you were talking about a lot in your map design last time. In fact, you got so many of the maps balanced that you were then able to start breaking that rule and really exploring some asymmetrical maps, which is cool, especially when you have so many balanced maps.
yeah,
But each one of these is a real project. Each one of these mission setups, that not just the map design itself, but then all the missions that were created from those maps, was quite a Herculean task.
right. So go ahead. I just want a quick question that I know a lot of people had. So there was in the mission booklet. We'll just reference. People want to know like how many maps first edition backers. If I just get the update kit, what am I going to be able to play? So we kind of have these bags here. I mean, it'd be easier probably pulling it from a spreadsheet, but since we're in here, we have the original 12 Pont that's been updated, Stlingrad, Cathedral, Hill 331, Cologne, Desert Oasis, and No Man's Land. So those 7 original 1v1 maps, 2-panel maps, all been revised. All right? And then now in the update kit is Morrow River and Ardennes Forest, and that's these 6 maps here. So if you're happy with that, like if you mostly play 1v1s and you're like, do I need the new, do I need the legacy map pack? I would say 13 maps, like I can't, for like even if you're playing almost weekly, I can't foresee you getting, worn out with that, like getting tired with that. I mean, yeah, you'll have this version of Trois Pas, but if you look at, let me just throw it out. It might pull panels though. That's my only concern, but we'll see of how the memory works. It pulls panels, but I should rewind. No, so here it is. So actually, this is fantastic. So you can kind of see. This is actually exactly what I wanted, so this worked out perfectly. So you can kind of see that, hey, look, I have the legacy. I don't have the legacy map pack. I'm playing Trois Pas. This is the map you're playing on. So you already see, like, is this fine for you? If this is fine for you, don't get it. You know, I don't want to talk us out of money during this whole stream, but like this, I intentionally designed this so it's fully backwards compatible. So if you're playing 1v1 maps, this wider bridge here, yeah, it's nicer. It's got a lot more cover. It's got the clear red lines. But with how
Yeah,
many
included in the update kit, of course,
right, this
through
is
the tunnels.
yeah, this is in the this is yeah, not in the update kit, but this is in the legacy map pack, the new 12 pom panels. If this is what you're interested in, if you want the extra cover, if you want, and this isn't even the fully latest, the buildings are gonna have like they're like a dark gray. We're gonna have little dots and the more colorblind friendliness on these, like because there's some that are green, so they're gonna have 2 dots. The yellow ones are gonna have 1 dot, and the reds have a dash, so to help with colorblind friendliness. And also, as you kind of see in this panel here, we removed these resource spots. They were confusing. Some people liked them, and that they could just set up the map. And I think that was the intention Chris had. I don't know if Chris wants to weigh in
Right.
on that one, but that was the intention, first edition for the default setup, so people could just lay it out, don't have to look at the mission booklet, and can just play.
Right. And frankly, we were just going to have 4 maps. That was what we were going to have originally, because there's so much replayability on just a single map, particularly when they're a well-designed map. There's so much replayability between all the different factions and all the commanders that just the single map can get so much use. So originally, it's just going to be 4 maps, and we're just going to pre-print it and just lower the setup cost a little bit. But then, as we unlocked moddable resource tokens in the first edition, it just exploded and opened up all these options, and we started doing different map combinations and increasing the map panels that we have, larger map panel sizes. And I mean, that was just a huge development. I mean, originally it was much more modest, just 3 maps, and it was always going to be the same map. And now we have dozens in different combinations. And so now, since almost in first edition, since 95% of the maps had custom resource and control point locations, having them pre-printed on the map, yeah, it was just kind of confusing. So it's best to just remove them all and just go to a completely custom mission setup for each map based off of the mini map setup in the mission booklet.
So to expand next, probably our next question is how do the hex is line up? You can kind of see as it gets, because of the new hex, you can kind of notice it from the very bottom. It's kind of where it's most noticeable. You have what these are like half hexes, if you will. So that's kind of how you have this top and bottom half hex, where originally we didn't have that. So the first edition didn't have that at all. When I saw things like this, again, the cut was a little bit different. Like what you have in person from the printer was, probably slightly different cut lines, so it might have not as been like as noticeable as I'm zooming in here. This kind of gap probably wasn't as noticeable, but I really wanted to standardize the grids. So once I said, okay, well, if I'm going to standardize the grids, what can we open up as options, right? Because I wanted to try to, people want that nice finished, high-level professional product. So I was like, what can we do with that? And it just kind of started going down a path of, okay, well, let's perhaps consider square maps for people with, more, big square tables or big round tables or hex tables. There's a lot of people that have that. Not everyone has a super long table. So just given different options was kind of my first thing. And we always had more cover in the back of our minds. And then later on, we're like, yeah, let's see how it plays with more cover. And wow, it plays phenomenal with more cover. Like I like
Yeah.
if you're someone who plays week in and week out, to be honest, you're gonna want more cover. Like it's just so much more fun and dynamic. You could push more. You can be a lot more aggressive. So you can kind of see, like, let's take one of the old panels and just kind of put them side by side here.
And the all map cover was so underutilized in first edition.
Yeah, like this is just so much more like all these trees and wooded area and along the edge, and then there's the cemetery here. If you're familiar with 12 Pump from COH2, it's like the cemetery, and then these like stone walls of the cemetery. I gave green lines where I could, where it was visually, and I even added some extra, visual cover there for extra walls and things to help, visually match the cover line. So it was a little bit more obvious why you're getting cover there. So there was a lot of this, again, just tuning and, this building. Another note is it's a small note, but this building from here was moved down here. So it was up here and it moved down there. It just made the map a little bit more balanced. That building on any of our map setups wasn't really getting too much value there. So we wanted to, it's still slightly asymmetrical, of course, as you can kind of see on this panel. They're not like perfect, but it just seemed like a nice spot to throw in a building, kind
It
of give
really
that city
congested
feel.
that bridge area too for that other team. I'm glad that building got out of there.
Right,
That building was there because it's there kind of in the
right.
actual video game that we took this map from. But I think a lot of second edition was learning where it was better to depart from such a precise translation of the video game. I feel like it almost sums up second edition a lot. Although in some cases you brought us closer to the video games. And most importantly, I think you brought us closer to the feel and the experience of the video games, even though we departed from the video games in some small specifics. We were just such slaves to the video games the first time, like just so one for one translation, and where you kind of broke away from a little bit, it you found the places where it really improved it. And the end result was often actually capturing the experience of the game a little bit more.
Looks
Let's
like
touch on those hex grid just a little bit because that's a big deal and a lot of people have questions about it. So this was a very tough choice for us as publishers because Brian came to us. He's like, we need to change all of the maps. And I was like, well, will they work with the old maps? He's like, no, not really. I'm like, what? We're going to change all the maps? But we went through it and he showed me in this new hex grid system because it's now so much cleaner and interchangeable and opens up options and the maps come together so much better. And it also opens up these square maps, which I think is a really important aspect for because before we were locked into this, this thin line. It's not that thin, but just as we added more players and bigger maps, it always went in one direction and the depth never changed. And it started to just feel a little bit abstracted, especially in those higher player counts, 4-panel maps in particular. So having that option was huge. And it just came down to is like, well, what are the old backers going to what are they going to do? Like, well, so we created the map tiles to handle the most essential, strategic, tactically important changes to the map so they can play the important tactical shifts like the big bridge tile we have for 12 Palms, as well as a bunch of other map tiles that just kind of help you fill in some gaps like move that building, etc. It doesn't handle all the additional cover, but it allows them to play the most important aspects of the revised maps. So we have that, but they're not being they can just use their old maps and they don't have to get the legacy map apps to get the core essentials. But still, it's kind of a bit of a leap to do. But if we just kept coming back to this, is that this is it. This is the second edition is going to be the edition. And do we want it to be perfect going forward, or do we not? Are we going to half step this? Are we going to do half measures? Are we just going to do soft fixes, or are we going to go all the way with it? And just time and time again, the choice was always we're going to go all the way and we're going to make it as good as possible. With perhaps a little bit of feeling of growing pains. But I think we've come to a nice compromise by letting people use their original maps with the update kit map tiles, and then the option to get the legacy map pack. They can have everything in its full glory.
Yeah, we have two questions as well. Not to probably interrupt you here. I think they're two good questions. The second one's definitely for you, but let's see the first one. Although as the new hexes are not the same as before, old vehicle tray won't fit on them, especially if we have a cluster of 45 vehicles. It may be noticeable this way, but a lot of the change is because of the half hex. Why you can kind of see it on this. It's like 95%. It's so close that
it all fits.
Everything
fits.
It's not going to be any issue from that front. But that's a really great question, and I mean that's a very good concern to have. That if you're putting vehicle tray next to vehicle tray, they're bumping each other anyway. So like if you're
Yeah.
trying to be a perfectionist, they like fit the hex exactly before. So it's they're gonna be bumping each other even in first edition because they were exact fit. So
It was one of my concerns. So I immediately printed out some of the new hex grid system. We did a test, and I was like, but what, everything was designed for those hexes. I was going to fit. Nah, it all fits. It works just fine because it's just so marginal. It's just a slight different shape change. So it's more of the structure and how he set up the grid.
and the next one here, I don't know if you mentioned it to the public, but I know you mentioned it to me. Wrapping the map on the cardboard was, in your own word, hard to get a perfect fit factory wise. Do you have a solution this time? I think you mentioned something like this, at least to me, but
Yeah, we're just doing black. So like any other board game. So they did a really strange thing because how board games how split cup boards are made is that they take the whole thing after it's cut, or maybe it's before it's cut. They wrap one side, it's the long side, and it goes on, and it has an extra 18 millimeters, which has to roll onto the other side. And then on the other side, it's kind of cut down a little bit, and it goes on top. So that top map's going over the wrap of the under one. This is just sort of how they're made for double-sided map boards. And very few board games out there have not only double-sided map boards, map panels, but then they take those double-sided map panels and put them next to each other. Seems like a simple thing, but it's actually very, very unusual in the board game industry because it does create some complexities. And so what our manufacturer did is, before, what we'd have the bright green of Monastery rolling over onto the edges of Stalingrad. So what they did is they took Monastery, and then in the far, this is probably way more technical than you want, but you have to be careful
That's nice.
asking me these questions. They took the 18 millimeter wrap bleed. They printed the outer edges of Stalingrad onto the front of Monastery, which is very clever. But you're really starting to get into the possibility of having variations, particularly in the micromillimeter placements. And I mean, so they're all handmade. So what you'd end up with is just like a little bit of offshooting. So our tests, our samples that are coming back, it's just black. It's a fade. We take Monastery and 12 Ponds, and we just sort of fade that graphic into a darker and darker bleed so that it wraps around with a little bit of a dark edge on its side. And on the other side, it just sort of has a dark edge. So it does mean that there's a little bit more of a defined line coming down between the map panels. But in our test, it's so subtle and slight, it looks fine. It's less jarring than having Stalingrad hexes be slightly off using that strange wraparound print of the other map, if that makes sense. But we're going to have samples of that very soon, and we actually have both samples. We have a couple different types coming from the manufacturer where we tested out. We're also testing out the opacity levels of the on-map cover. So we have some samples en route. They probably will be here before the end of the Kickstarter campaign, and we'll just be presenting this to our backer community like we did the first time around. We put everything in front of you guys and let you see what you think and have your comments and kind of get your go ahead on some of this stuff. And usually we had a pretty definitive majority on these choices. So anyway, we're going to show them, and you'll see what you think looks better. But from what I can tell, this will be a nice, clean solution.
yeah,
And
awesome.
we'll make matching maps up a little bit better. It's going to work. I think it's going to work really well.
So here you can see again another sample, the Stalingrad. There was just a lot of feedback we were seeing in playtesting that there was kind of too much ice for competitive purposes. People were just losing too many units in the ice. So people just kind of saying, oh, let's just, play without the ice rules. I played fine, it was fun. But you can see, yeah, so this is like, again, if you play without the ice rules with the new setup, still ready to go. It can still, it's a lot more interesting and dynamic. Hopefully, you could play it as this is destroyed. You could play it as the building as we show in the mission booklet. Fully flexible. And then here's the new one where just a lot more life to it. Again, maybe this interests you, maybe it doesn't. Fully up to you. But yeah, you can start to see a little bit more trees on the edges, so that combines with Ardennes Forest. This is kind of where the blending came in. later in development. And we're trying a double bunker here, so you can put both of your bunkers on this map side by side to have a really big, awesome bunker experience. So you can have that multi-hex bunker battles. And yeah, the key thing though with the second edition is that all the victory points are off the ice. So if you want to play at the ice rules, they're on the back. They're going to be on the back of the third tier building of all the factions, so it'll be easy reference. You won't have to open up the mission booklet or anything. Just trying to make it more fun and thematic, and that's kind of the focus of this map is the ice, fighting over, the frozen river basically here on Stalingrad. We added this little bridge here, so in the center. Just just all these small little touches.
Making it a little safer for them. I think this is a really great shift, Brian. The ice rules are fun, but they shouldn't be game changing. The whole game shouldn't come down to an ice rule, which it does sometimes when it's when you have victory points and key strategic points on the ice. Now it's more about pathing, and if you get stuck on the ice on an assault or a flank, right?
Right. I mean, that's kind of the point. And we were seeing a lot of units, like if you lost a unit early on the ice, it could have been game over sometimes, especially, but there was overall just less ice. It's it might be hard to see comparatively on the same screen at the same time. Let me try to move them perhaps to
If you fall on the
this.
ice now, it's because you chose to take the risk.
Exactly. That was the design goal with it, is that there's just like you can kind of see along the river edges. It was 3-4 wide here at parts. So now it's just a little bit more. Yeah, it had a more of a grand river feel before, but it was kind of just too much to the point where if you wanted to fire at your opponent, one of you had to go on the ice, and so it was cool, but it was just a little bit too much. So those are probably the two maps that were, you know, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and I could show you the other map changes. But they were less significant overall. These were the two bigger ones, so I just really wanted to highlight these so people can we can hopefully answer a lot of those questions that people have on the maps.
Hill 331 Monastery did not change too much, right?
Yeah, they were a lot more subtle. Hill 331 was probably the least. It was just a couple red lines here and there. It wasn't that impactful. It was more of just to help crossing the map at certain spots, to just kind of get rid of a couple bottlenecks. There was just a few too many. It was just a lot of things we were seeing in play testing.
And a little more fair pathing too, right?
Yeah, a little bit more fair pathing. And then Hill 331, Cathedral was a little bit more cover on the Cathedral side, where I really wanted to stick with that airfield theme, because one of the maps is called Airfield on the bunker side. So basically, it's just there's one cover per side of lake cover, and then the rest of it is open on that side except for the bunker. So kind of wanted to stick with that theme, but the Cathedral side has a little bit more nooks and crannies, if you will, behind little walls and little sections and trees and things to get either light cover or heavy cover in. And
I think you fixed the balance on some of those outbuildings too.
Oh yes, that's another key thing. Is now there's 4. Now there was 2. They were across from each other, and that kind of forced this weird asymmetry on a lot of maps. It was hard to use.
Yeah, as soon as you recombined it with another map, it threw the symmetry all to hell.
Right. So now there's 4 there. And I know a lot of comments were like, oh, can there be a hole in the wall? But I think that really kind of took away from that really map style. So I really stuck with that and tried to really design the missions that use that panel to really come to life and offer different dynamics. So hopefully you'll get to see that.
Do you want to throw that up just for the heck of it?
Yeah,
I want to talk about the maps a little bit more. So one of the biggest difference, there's some really powerful, pretty simple rules changes or just structural changes that have transformed the feeling of the game. While it's still Company of Heroes. It's still the same board game, but it just feels and plays dramatically different. I don't know. It's bizarre how different it feels while still being Company of Heroes or Company of Heroes board game. And one of those was breaking the rules of the video game, the rules of the video games, or the precedent of video games, and that is by not limiting ourselves to 3 victory points. I mean, in all the maps, Couple Heroes 2, there's 3 victory points. That's it. And of course, that's how we designed all of our first edition maps. But this time around, there's now 5 and 7 victory point maps. And this was transformative to the game and the strategies and your choices and reducing bottlenecks, reducing gaminess, like just really opened up the maps a lot. That was one of the most fundamental key changes, I would say, of second edition. At least that's what really got the ball rolling as far as transforming the play style and the player choices. If not I don't know, there's quite a few that all come together to create second edition, but that is I think, one of the most important ones.
Yeah,
So simple,
yeah,
but
yeah.
do you agree?
Yeah, that was kind of one of the ideas I pushed on very early on. It was just a lot of just watching playtests and seeing how units clumped on certain victory points and how it's so much easier once you captured a point to defend it, where units in general had to be fighting over multiple points, otherwise it was just too hard to capture a point from your opponent. So that was kind of one of the earliest big major changes we saw with like even we started to get assault rolling, early assault changes, and that two combination early on. Neutralization actually didn't come till later. And that was kind of like, to me, that was like the finishing touch of the whole system coming together. So
yeah, between those extra victory point maps, assault rules, and neutralization, frankly the limited amount of control points and how once you got that center one, all you had to do is hold your other one. Like you could start to predict the outcome of a game at round 3. The comeback, it shot the comeback mechanics all to hell.
Yeah,
like, very difficult. And now it feels like there's so many options.
Yeah, that last little thing I got to interrupt on was now when you hit the victory point total, it's a end game trigger instead of just winning immediately or whoever you want to call it.
There's your final piece.
That was my final piece. Yeah. I actually witnessed 2 playtesters where one was just winning enough. And it was these 2 guys that play regularly. I mean, they played so many games. They're probably, played the most games out of anyone. And one was just enough winning that he retreated all his infantry the final round. And I was like, this is a nightmare. I got to fix this. So that was so infuriating to see that he had just enough of a lead that he's like, if I don't lose any units, I don't care if you capture this 1 point that you can easily capture. So that his opponent had 3 out of the 5 after that. It was on the new Stlingrad, and I was like, really? Like it needs something. I'm like, it needs obviously something.
He still lost. Yeah, the guy who took 3 points still lost because he denied him of the ability to get victory points from kills.
Exactly. Yep. So now when the end game triggers, whoever has the most at that final round after the capture step, you get 3 extra. And that's enough to any game that's reasonably close. Like, if you're blowing someone out, you're still blowing them out. I mean, there's nothing, if there's that big of a skill gap or someone made multiple major mistakes, I mean, any game of this level of skill, there's just comes a point where, yeah, I mean, if something severely bad happened, you're just going to have to go to the next game and try again. But the whole point of second edition was to really narrow that down to that those are much more outliers. Unless you're like training someone new, they're not familiar with tactical, war games, and you've played 10, 20 games of this and you're an expert. Yeah, like there's only so much we could do in that situation, right? So anything a lot closer. We've had so many comebacks now where someone was down by 5, 6, 7 points and they're able to come back, and it's such a cool thing to watch now. So
it's really cool. It creates this sort of final play in the game. It really adds some climax to it as well. It's something to like look for and reach for and like playing your final. It means that you end up playing to the end too with it as well. So many less players seceding, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, still, that can happen. Like, I don't want to say it's never going to happen, right? We don't want to say that because clearly, if the dice don't go your way, if you're in a building and you roll 3 reds, I mean, it's already a bad sign, and that can happen. But I mean, the odds of that is like 1 in 256 or something. Like, it's something just not really going to happen often. But when you watch enough games, it can happen. So last thing we wanted to probably focus on in this video, and then we're going to have another video. I think Chris is going to really focus on getting kind of showing those component counts and a lot of those other publisher focused
Right.
questions that people have. And that's going to be, I think, the stream a week from today, if I recall off the top of my head. If not, it's just that one that says publisher. If you see that in the list, but hope a lot of people are wanting for a quick rundown of the factions. Very quick overview. We have these big long overviews that I've been doing with Slava. We're actually I just was messaging him and he wants to do the Wehrmacht one later tonight. So
Great.
we're gonna get
I
that
love
one
them.
in.
Loving those.
Yes.
Can I go over just real quick the
Oh yeah,
list of
sure.
some of the other
Go ahead.
changes and lead with the faction? So you saw the map redesigns and then some core structural victory condition redesigns. And we did quickly mention as part of those the assault rules, and that's not just victory condition, that's just it's game wide transformed and reduced the gaminess and opened up options. The assault rules, it almost needs its own video to explain. You've covered it in a couple other ones, but that was a huge shift. It's so big that we put it right up on the front of the Kickstarter page. So we'll probably go into the specifics of that a little bit later, but that's a huge change from first edition to second edition, inspired by Company Heroes 3, and then Brian took that and ran with it and removed one of the biggest weaknesses of first edition, where you could just throw people onto a hex and just keep them there dying, and you could just hold it down. Now, no hex is completely safe just because you happen to have a unit. But then Brian did quite a bit of adjustments on the machine gun rules and cleaned those up. I really love the new firing arcs. So we adjusted our firing arcs and kind of caught a compromise between the old first edition's wide firing arcs and the specialty rules narrow firing arcs. And now the firing arcs are, I think, basically in that sweet spot, right? We did
Yeah.
have a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because that just came. That was another one from the community. There was a lot of these. I have to say, it was really led by the community. A lot of these changes. It was about 50-50. So like
Right.
50% was from us and just feedback we've gathered pre-campaign, and then during the just feedback from people filling out forms. But the active playtesters really had like 50% of the critical changes in second edition. So it's just a huge appreciation. Shout out to them. But yeah, I mean, it made a huge difference, and that firing arc was one of them where we were like, we added firing arcs to mortars and to emplacements to kind of balance it out, to CP usage and things, and to kind of make it so that mortars in the center of the map couldn't just pick their target during the damage step, which was it was just a little not so fun. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
It was just hard to really tweak and write. No matter how we tweaked the mortar numbers, that was kind of a go-to strategy, and it made sense, right, with a big range to be able to do that. And then that arc was like, I saw that and I tested and I was like, I jumped immediately on board on that. I was like, wow, that was such a great idea, guys. So.
Yeah, especially even for the mortars. That limitation makes the mortars more fun to use and play against.
Right, because it actually
just to feel like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say because it gave us that change, kind of gave us more leeway to focus on mortars doing other things, like having all now the 5 standard range, where before with them not having a firing arc, that would have been like utterly ridiculous, like
Right.
kind of like the Soviets were in first edition. Now we're like, oh well, now we can revisit that 5, and it also opened up more things. Like now when we had that late testing of splash, that was kind of the last
Right.
changes. But yeah, I mean, we can focus a little bit more. I have a second designer, I think 2 designer videos left. The first one is going to be on Thursday. We're going to do a little bit more of a solo in depth. I'm actually going to be hopping over on someone's channel here shortly to do a little solo overview on our YouTube channel. I could probably post the links to our channels here shortly as I hop over there. But there's also going to be one on Thursday, and then I think next Thursday I can kind of get into more of these mechanisms and kind of go over with people anything that they have, kind of walk through some examples. That's probably my goal with that one. Walk through examples of assault, walk through a lot of these core rule changes, the operations deck we didn't even get to discuss here.
The operations deck, yes. I forgot about that.
So many big changes, we kind of ran out of time. So,
and then not to mention the big one, I mean the real big one as well, is the total faction overhauls. Unit faction differentiation, unit differentiation and balance, commander card differentiation and balance. I mean, that's a real meaty, chunky part of second edition where the rubber really hits the road as far as making changes and transforming play styles, tactics, and your options. I mean, that's the other half of the of the second edition is everything that you did, because no unit was left untouched, I don't think.
No, it wasn't. I mean, there was a couple outliers that lasted about halfway through, but no, about a few 6 months through, there was only like two or less than five, I'd say, that were kind of left alone. But then we kind of just were balancing and tweaking, so they all found their nice spot at the end. Because there was a lot of units where like the T-34 on the Soviets, so people were like, why would I ever go this tank? And a lot of the initiative was to make all the main battle tanks, like if you don't know what to do, go your main battle tank. That was kind of a huge drive in the second
Right.
edition. Again, if you don't know what to do, just go and you'll have a good game. Like you'll be competitive. You don't need to go these specialty units. What was the war about? Really, it was about each faction's main battle tank. I mean, that's why it was the main battle tank. So we
Right.
really wanted to focus on that, highlight those, make them a lot more attractive options. And sometimes it was more price competitive, sometimes it was just overall quality of life changes. But yeah, I can get into all that. We're kind of running out of time here. We
Yeah.
probably don't have time to do the faction. I'll do that first thing. I'm gonna note that down for first thing.
Like a quick run through all the factions.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a quick
Right.
run through next. So not this designer one, but my next designer one. I'll lead with that, and then I'll get into mechanics for people in case
Good.
they don't have the time to watch that super. These kind of big ones that I'm doing with
Although you
Slava.
should. It's fascinating. I tried to skip forward. I can't. It's too interesting. I had to go back and watch
Definitely.
every word of it. Just to leave on that little note, just as like a little hanger, what Brian did with these factions units is what's so cool. Is he found them. He identified the role of that type of unit, main battle tank or their tank hunter. He really helped differentiate and establish what that role does, and then within that role, found a unique differentiation for each faction's unit that was in that category or that subcategory. So it really feels like all the roles are very, very distinct and they have their place, and then each faction's unit that is a member of that role are played with a differentiation in their own unique faction style. And I think that's one of my favorite things about the faction.
No, exactly. Just that's a great note to leave on, because a lot of people, when you're seeing these new commanders and stuff, and you're saying, oh, well, now all the factions have access to, like, a lot more have a sniper. Like Wehrmacht has a sniper, and British has a sniper, and Soviets already had a sniper in their core kit. Why are you doing this? But it's like they played completely different. They have different roles. Like they have stats that are just a few different. Like the Soviet sniper only has 2 health and can get up to 3 AI, which is pretty huge, but it's so frail. Where the Wehrmacht sniper comes out of the gate off the commander with 2 AI, so it's a little bit more offensive focus for that investment and has 3 health, so you can be a little bit more aggressive with it. And these small little, looking at a card, you might say, oh, that's not that big of a deal, but in play, you'll see as you kind of play these things, and then the British one starts with 2 AI and 1 AP, so it's that flexible role that the British don't really have, where it can kind of help support against infantry and kind of help against light vehicles with the AT boys rifle. So these kind of roles, kind of once you see them in action, you'll be like, now I see what you're saying, how they're playing a little bit different here. And the faction's core really is their core identity anyway. So like, how does a sniper fit into British? British is kind of designed, just a very, very quick here, is lack of damage. So kind of British sniper really offer that, where for a Soviet sniper, it's a different role there, so I just want to end with that.
And it was key to you, and you also made each general sort of categorical role have its specific place in the entire game system as well. Like snipers have their place. It's not just a one-off. It's a defined role that has its place in the ecosystem, which is differentiated from all the other ones. Anyway, so I feel like you did that across all the board with the categories as well as the individual units within it. And they play. You have to play them completely differently or quite different, right?
Yes, and I just one last note I see from the community, from Sebastian here, answering Fixer's question. Yes, all 2-panel maps have at max 12 capture points and 9 buildings now. So the new Stlingrad again had first edition had 9 destroyed buildings. It has 8 now. So all these things have been tweaked out, where it's 6 flag poles per panel. So that's something. So once you get to the 2-panel, all of them have max 6. It can have less, but that's kind of the maximum per panel size, just for those watching. So again,
It's a little more
Chris,
systematized and helps you identify like what terrain packs you need and how many you need. But we do have a little bonus coming out. We have a little, not even called a surprise, but we're reacting to some of the feedback considering terrain pack, and we've got like a nice little solution for everybody to help them reduce their need to get 2 terrain packs to handle 4 panel maps. We're working on it. We're going to announce it and release it this week.
yep, so we have that, and then again, we're going to have kind of a wrap-up of that conversation on that, kind of that note next week in that video where we're going to discuss, hey, if I'm looking for, kind of I touched on a little bit with the legacy maps, who's going to go a little bit more in depth from that perspective, like what type of backer is looking for what player counts, what are you looking for, what expansions, because there is a lot. We fully understand that, and it can be overwhelming. We have the general guidelines, but there is so many expansions that we kind of do want to do a video focusing on that, kind of from a publisher perspective, why there's this many products and which products are for who and that type of thing is probably going to be the focus.
And which
of that
ones
video.
you should prioritize? Oh, sorry to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
But
That's
yeah,
right.
which ones you should prioritize based off of the type of player you are, what your gaming group is, and of course your investment level. You know what I mean? What's the most bang for your buck for your situation? Because there is so many products and there's so many different types of gamers in this game that can go from 1 to 8 players. That I think the more guidance we provide, the better. But we'll be doing that in next week's video, and we're also working on some more visual guides for the Kickstarter page today.
Yeah. Chris was away in case everyone was wondering, the last few days without an update. Chris was celebrating the 4th of July here in the United States, if you weren't aware. So he's kind of our main update guy. So just kind of... Marcel
I
was
did come
also
home
out
at
of
2
town.
a.m. last night and tried and wrote one out, but I deleted it. In my fugue state, I deleted it while I was trying to publish it. And Marcel just came back from a 4-day rock concert, so if you're wondering why he hasn't been responding.
So we had kind of planned, we kind of planned the Kickstarter around that, with that in mind, and thanks to all you guys and all you backers, kind of burned us through all those stretch goals that we didn't quite have that next one ready. So now we're back, we're ready to go, and
that's right.
We'll have an update possibly later today, but if not, definitely another one tomorrow. And if you haven't signed up for the tournament, we're going to get that link set up. It's kind of working on phones.
That should come today. We're going to announce the update and guide for the tournament. By the end of the day.
EU tournament this weekend. We're going to have EU-friendly times. Anyone can sign up anywhere. It's just that kind of gearing it towards EU-friendly times. And then the America-friendly tournament the last weekend there. So I think that's it from us. Any last things you guys have to say?
I'm good. Thanks for streaming this, Brian, and setting it up. Hopefully it was informative. And Marcel?
Yeah, I didn't talk a lot, as you noticed, but you guys are such quick and native speakers, so it's hard to come through. But we mentioned most important stuff already, so that's really good. And I'm just happy to be back and be active in the campaign again. Even during Metallica, I was still thinking about tanks, but that's another story for another time.